Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the potential impact of the latest polling, which shows a Farage factor that the Tories will not be enjoying, as well as how we can capitalise on it. Because although voting intention polls are arguably less useful than MRP polls right now, they still have the power to scare the pants off the Tories, which ironically means they're more likely to be pressured into making things even worse for themselves. And the more the Tories mess up, the higher the chance of ultimate success for tactical voting. And, there's been a couple of polls published in the last 24 hours, at least, one from YouGov and Ipsos, both quality pollsters. It's worth noting that neither of them will bear close comparison with their previous polls. And that's because they've changed things a bit. YouGov have changed their entire methodology to match that of their MRP polls. So no point comparing this voting intention poll with their previous voting intention polls. Ipsos have updated their latest population figures, so that's not a change of methodology, but it affects the results anyway, a little bit. Mind you, at this point, it's also probably not worth comparing polls with previous polls anyway. Normally, I would say, never mind the up and down, we need to look at the long-term trends. That's what I've said for a long time. You need to look at the long-term trends for the direction of travel. But apart from the fact methodology is changing, and voter attitudes will undergo the same change. The election's in just 4 weeks. So long-term directions of travel, not really that relevant now. We may be about to enter a period of flux where things change around quite a bit, or it may be that things remain very static. Remember, despite what some journalists are saying, even decent ones, there is no perceived wisdom that polls narrow. That is an urban myth which only those who don't study polls hold. Sometimes polls narrow, yes. Mostly they don't. But the YouGov poll is very interesting. If you bang the results into the electoral calculus MRP calculator, you get 56 seats for the Tories and 63 for the Liberal Democrats. So the Tories would be in third place, happy days. And the Tories can think themselves lucky that YouGov did change their methodology, because if they hadn't, it'd be even worse. With Reform UK on the same share of the vote as the Conservatives, something I'd said might happen some time ago. But it would also produce a rough MRP calculation of just 19 seats for the Tories. At that point, you're getting into a situation where if the SNP do slightly better, they're in fourth place. Now, if politicians were all bright and sensible, I would say this news is largely irrelevant. I wouldn't even mention it. There are MRP polls being released, and they are way better to look at during a general election campaign. They're just not updated as often. Right now, I would say you could probably just leave the voting intention polls. The public opinions on other matters are useful. So the polls where they're asking the public what they think of this or this policy or that policy, or the difference between Labour and the Conservatives. Sure, absolutely. But the actual voting intention polls are less useful than the large scale MRP polls. Like YouGov's latest is like 60,000, as opposed to their roughly 2,000 voting intention polls, and they've been published at the same time. So which one are you going to look at, the MRP poll? However, politicians are not bright or sensible. I've said this before. One of the most profound political revelations of my life, because I was interested in politics from a young age, one of the biggest revelations in my life in terms of being interested in politics was when I realised that most MPs across all parties are as thick as mince. If you're lucky, your party of choice lets the genuinely bright ones rise to the top. Conservative supporters not being very lucky right now. And so Tory candidates will pay attention to these polls. They will see results of finishing in third place. They will see it's been caused by a surge in support for Reform UK since Nigel Farage made his announcement. And they will lose their minds. I mean, I look at this as, most of the pollsters, especially online pollsters, which include YouGov, seem to have a bit of a blind spot with Reform UK. I could be wrong. I mean, in 4 weeks' time, we'll find out. 4 weeks and a day. My hypothesis is that it's caused by a couple of things. First, Reform UK are getting a disproportionate hearing in the media because their outrageous statements and stunts are great clickbait. However, because they have no ground operation, they don't have the infrastructure to get to enough voters on the doorstep during a national election campaign. By-election, different matter. They can funnel all of their resources into one part of the country to campaign there. You can have Richard Tice door knocking, Ben Habib, Anne Widdecombe if she can be asked to get out of bed. They can all descend upon that one place. But when you're fighting Every seat in the country, up and down the country, a national poll. You can't, you're spread too thin. And because you don't have the local network of activists, you don't have enough of them, you're not going to be able to knock on enough doors. You know, the fact that the polls tend to show that Reform UK won't win very many, if any, seats also means Reform UK supporters may go, well, we're not going to win, so I'll just vote Conservative tactically. Second, people who complete online surveys tend to sign up for them for the reason I did. So there's a disproportionate number of politically engaged people completing the polls. Now, of course, good pollsters do what they can to account for this because they'll map it onto previous voting behaviour as a template. But it's tricky with unique beasts like Reform and with an election where there is going to be a big swing in voting behaviour. You know, I've sometimes played about with the figures and sort of reduced Reform UK's figures and bunged up Lib Dems and things like that, and the Tories figures as well, of course. And, you know, you can easily get the Tories winning an extra 106 with a little bit of tweaking. Still their worst ever result, but a far cry from being in third place. But tactical voting is what could then cost the Tories those same 100 seats back again. And happily, I can now tell you that the stopthetories.vote site is now up and running properly. The postcode search will now give you one of three things. First, the considered tactical vote choice for your constituency. If it gives you a choice now, it's accurate, should be fine. Second, if the Conservative candidate in your constituency can't realistically win, it will advise you to vote in whichever way you think best. There is no need for tactical voting. Remember, this is anti-Tory tactical voting. It's not trying to boost any party, just eliminate the Tories. Or third, if it's not yet clear who the tactical vote needs to go to in your constituency, they're waiting for more data to come through. It's not like you can vote right now anyway, and it'll make it clear as well that that's what they're doing. But the site's postcode search now functions. You don't need to give them any information. If you don't want to, you'd have to sign up for anything. You can just put your postcode in, that's it. Note that there are a small number of postcodes which are chopped in two by constituency boundaries. So if that applies to you, there'll be a drop-down menu come up. It says, which side of it are you on? That's easy as well. Remember that the large-scale MRP polls are not saying the Tories are in third place right now. Only some of these voting intention polls, when you put it through a rough and ready simulator. We need a real push on tactical voting to make this happen, as well as a push on getting non-voters to get involved. Because you'd be really helping if you could persuade people. You will know some people who can't be bothered to vote. Or they might say, yeah, I might vote. It's like, yeah, but you're not really going to, are you? You know them. Help them register to make it easier. Help them sign up for postal. If you don't think they're going to go out on the day, help them sign up for postal voting. You could get the form for them. They just need to fill it in. You could post it for them. When the postal ballot arrives, you could say, can you fill it in, please? Seal it up in the envelope, and then they can give it to you the next day. You can post it for them again. Make it as easy as possible. And we may boost the number of non-voters voting as well. We have a real chance to make these simple voting intention polls become a reality. We're not there yet. Remember, the latest YouGov voting intention polls puts the Tories on 56 seats. But the latest YouGov massive MRP poll, which was basically published earlier this week, so around about the same time, puts them on 140 seats. The margins are very tight. But MRP polls are saying the Tories are going to sneak a lot of seats by small margins. It's tactical voting which needs to make those margins up. And remember, the ultimate goal of this exercise is not just to punish the Tories for what they've done. It's much more positive than that. That'd be far too negative. It is to collect together a massive voice that says, we want electoral reform. To create a large voting bloc united for the purpose of demanding reforms, which means we don't have to vote tactically like this in the future. Part of what the stopthetories.vote site does is it gives you the tools to email the candidate that you're going to vote tactically for and say, I'm going to vote for you tactically because I want electoral reform. And then if they win, afterwards you could email them again and say, I voted for you tactically in order for electoral reform. Now, if one person does that, it's one person. If 500 people do that in your constituency, that is a voice. Remember, in 2020, when the Tories were trying to take free school meals off kids in poverty during the pandemic, Tory MPs were describing the fact that they were getting hundreds of emails about this. That was a big issue for them. So if they get hundreds of emails about a thing, that thing is important, right? And you know, the benefit of this to us is Tories don't get to destroy progressive policies supported by the majority of voters, or inflict authoritarian policies opposed by the majority of voters. There's a huge level of support for an electoral system which makes Parliament reflect the public much better. It's just that this support is too spread out. It needs to use its voice, and your vote is your voice. Why should Tory candidates fear Reform UK and not us? Way more of us than Reform UK supporters. But we're not united enough. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.